Good afternoon and welcome to Virtual Face-to-Face with President Bruce Jarrell. I'm Alex Lukowski, Assistant Vice President for Communications. It will hit you the moment you walk through the doors of the Nathan Patz Law Center that something exciting is happening at the University of Maryland Francis King Carey School of Law. And the source of much of that energy is certainly the self-described chief cheerleader, Dean Renee McDonald Hutchins. Last April, Hutchins came back to Carey Law to address faculty as a candidate to replace the then Dean Donald Tobin. And I can tell you, as someone who was there, that the room was electric, full of smiles and greetings. Hutchins had been a faculty colleague for 14 years and then left to head the University of the District of Columbia David A. Clark School of Law for 3 years, employing her experience as co-director of Carey Law's clinical law program. In a short time, the ranking of UDC's clinical law program rose from 15 to 5. Now, when she isn't celebrating faculty work like shouting out Mark Graber for speaking on the sketchy history of the Dobbs case or Menka Sinha for her breakdown of pretrial detention, she's building community with things like the Law Talent Show and Carey Casual Tuesdays, which is a big hit, or even playfully suggesting that a certain faculty member, and I will not reveal Kathy Hoke's name at this time, might actually be trying to kill her with the apparently irresistible snack food Funyuns. The job is never about you, Hutchins recently told social and style guru Sloan Brown. It is always about everybody else in the building. And this, she added, referring to Carey Law, is my tribe. Combine love of the community with love of the law, and it's no wonder at the end of Hutchins' first week last August, she gushed on Twitter, great first week as UMD Law Dean, chatted with Richard Bolt about coercive medication, with Sarah Everhart about Ag Law Initiative, Mike Kennard about Center on Race, and with Dan Goldberg about subtraction method VAT, and so much more. Hashtag I love my job. Now, I want to be sure to note that was at the end of the first week. And right at the start of day one, she was sure to pose with and thank the very best known person at Carey Law, which is longtime security officer Annette Tate. And what a time for this or any law school to feel that surge of energy and deepening commitment. The law and our relationship to it, of course, are always changing, but there's so much more happening right now that it must be exhilarating to teach the law or to be a student getting ready to jump into a career in it. Will the so-called abortion pill be outlawed in every state? Can the president cancel $40 billion in student loans without Congress? Do social media companies bear any responsibility for what's said in their platforms? And does the right to free speech allow a business to discriminate against same-sex couples? The law is a thread, Hutchins says, that runs through everything and every aspect of our lives. So what's the plan for Carey Law? Well, for starters, the dean has said, rebuild the Carey Law community and support a culture of congeniality. At the same time, work to ensure that the community inside Maryland Carey Law, students, faculty, staff, shares the same wide diversity of qualities that the community we serve has. That's race, sex, gender, religion, background, philosophy, whichever. You can read all about Dean Hutchins' background online, but I do want to mention one thing. She's a scholar and expert in the areas of criminal law procedure and the Fourth Amendment. In fact, if you're a C-SPAN geek like me, do yourself a favor and watch her discussion of the colorful 1961 Mapp v. Ohio case that resulted in the prohibition of unlawfully obtained evidence in trial. Trust me, it's a good one. All right, I need to tell you this program is being recorded and will be posted on the UMB homepage. A little later in the program, you'll have a chance to ask your own questions about the law school, or anything else. It's never too early to write that question and send it to me in the chat function. And don't worry, I will give you a heads up when we're ready to go to you. Now, please welcome your host, UMB President, Dr. Bruce Jarrell.
Thank you, Alex, and it's a pleasure to be here and to welcome all of you in the crowd, and especially Dean Hutchins.
This meeting is being recorded.
Have had the pleasure of working together for many years, and more recently when she came back as Dean of the School of Law. It's been my great pleasure. Renee, I wonder sometimes, what was the hardest part about coming back?
The reverse commute?
The reverse commute.
There was really nothing hard about coming back. I have loved this institution for a very, 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 very long time. And I have felt deeply connected to my colleagues here on the faculty, to the staff, to the students here since the early 2000s. And so for me, there was nothing hard about coming back to this place. It was hard for me to leave UDC. But there was nothing hard about returning here.
What was hard about leaving UDC?
I am driven by mission I work because I want to be value added and because I think that I can do good in a place. I don't really chase credentials or accolades or money. I should probably never say that to my boss. But shoot. But I felt like the work that I was doing at UDC mattered and that we were at a place where we were just starting to see the fruits of 3.5 very hard years of labor start to produce. And so it was hard to walk away from that. And I can say with absolute candor, there is nowhere that I would have walked away from that for other than here.
Well, we're glad you did. I certainly am glad you did, and nice to have you here. There was some point in your life when you decided you wanted to go into law. What was that point, and how did that happen? Are you glad it happened?
I am very glad it happened because I can think of no profession that would have brought me greater joy. And I always say that I can tell a fantastic story about my resume looking backwards. I don't know that I could have told as coherent a story about it looking forward. So I was a math major in undergrad. And when I got to my senior year, I had about had it with math. I had written my math thesis and I was mathed out. And there were really two paths for math majors when I graduated. You could either go get your PhD in math or you could become an actuary. The latter seemed intensely boring to me, and the former, after a math thesis, seemed exhausting. And I had a friend who was taking the LSAT, and she said, why don't you take the LSAT? It's next weekend. And at that point, I feel like you could sign up for the LSAT a week before you took it, and signed up, took the LSAT, and because it is a logic test and I was a math major, ended up doing really, really well on it. And I thought, hey, maybe the law is a space I could thrive in. And ended up going to law school, loved law school. And after I got into law school, realized that it was exactly where I was always supposed to be. Because, and I think you've heard this story, Bruce, and I'm sure some other people on the call have heard this story. My dad's family is from South Carolina, and they were very actively involved in one of the companion cases to the Brown versus Board of Education decision, which desegregated America's schools. Brown was actually 5 cases, and one of those cases came out of South Carolina, the Clarendon County case. And my dad used to tell a story about the blowback that his grandfather had received for being an organizer. And when I was growing up, he told the story all the time and talked about how all the threats that his grandfather had received and that his family had received, and told a story about a day when there was a Klan parade in front of his grandfather's house that his grandfather had made him sit and watch with him. And I used to think growing up that was insanity and used to wonder why anybody would have invited that kind of attention on themselves. And I came to realize after I got into law school that it was because the law has the power to make ordinary people do extraordinary things. That it was my great grandfather's belief in the power of the courts to create a better America for his children and his grandchildren that gave him the wherewithal to do what he had done. And so looking backwards, I can say I landed exactly where I should have been all along. But I don't know that I knew that as a senior math major at Spelman College.
Well, I was going to say I would never equate law and mathematics. That would be a tough one for me. But I guess the logic part makes sense.
Yeah, they're
I wouldn't
actually
have
very,
necessarily.
very similar, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Well, so you live on you work on the corner of Baltimore Street and Paca Street, don't you?
I do.
Uh, and you're a block away from Utah Street and the Hippodrome, and you know about all the things that have been going on along Utah Street about the drug dealing and the policing and all that. You got any advice for any of us?
Um, well, I would offer a broad sweeping bit of advice first. We know that talent is not segregated by zip code. We also know that opportunity is. And that when you create systems and structures in a country that limit opportunities for extremely talented people, that communities will find workarounds. And so if we, UMB, want to be of Baltimore and not just in Baltimore, it is incumbent upon us to correct some of that systemic oppression and discrimination, that it is incumbent upon us to create opportunities for our partners and our neighbors in the city, that we are never going to correct Utah Street without correcting the neighborhoods and communities in the city that have been systemically disinvested in for generations. And so it is not about fixing isolated instances of criminal activity or nuisance activity. It is about correcting systems of oppression that have limited opportunities for generations of people. And I think that we do great work in that regard. I think that I am very proud to say, a campus that is intentional and focused on being a good partner to our surrounding community and to our neighbors, that we don't have giant walls around our campus, that we are interested in elevating not just the plots of land that we sit on, but West Baltimore generally, that we are very invested in this community and making it a thriving and engaged and vibrant community, not just for the faculty, staff, and students who are here, but recognizing that until we elevate this part of Baltimore for all who are in it, that it is not going to thrive. And so that would be my humble advice with regard to correcting the issues on Utah.
But you give me a tall order, because that sounds like I don't even know where to start when you present it like that. And I don't know how to measure that I'm having success. So you've got me in a box here. How do I get out of that box? I mean, where do you start?
You start where you are and you use what you have and you do what you can. And so to suggest that it is a big problem, to me, is never an answer, right? So we sit on a campus with a collective of schools that are all immediately involved in the improvement of the human condition. And we all use different tools to do that. And so it is about using the tools that we have in front of us to tackle the problems that we can. And the problems are multifaceted and multi-pronged and thorny and difficult and hard. And we are smart and invested and capable of solving them. And so it's the work that, at the law school, it is the work that our clinics are doing to ensure that the lives of regular Baltimoreans who otherwise would not have access to justice are improved. It is the work that the med school is doing to stand up clinics in the community, or that the dent school is doing to stand up clinics in the community. It's the work that the nursing school is doing and the social work school is doing to pipeline people into their programs so that they can then push them back out into the community to provide services. It is a big problem, without question. It is a big problem, and it took us generations to get here. But I am confident that UMB, with all of its time and talented and resources, is capable of making a dent in the problem, if not for the nation, at least for this city and state in which we sit, because we are the flagship institution in this city. And I am eminently hopeful about our ability to use our time and resources in a way that is going to improve this area for all of us.
You give me hope. I do know it's a difficult problem, and at the same time, and maybe I don't even use the word problem correctly, it's a difficult set of issues to
It
try
is.
to address. And it's hard to know that when you're making progress. Let's
Yeah.
just put it that way. And that's something I think a lot about, of how would we know that we're having all of this broad impact? I can do it one person at a time. I'm not sure I can see it broadly,
Mhm.
just from my perspective.
But that's the way we get to. So for me, that's always the challenge between data and anecdotes, right? Data is just a collection of anecdotes. That's all it is. And so even if you are tackling the problem one anecdote at a time, eventually you get to the place where you've got data, and eventually you get to the place where you've got system change. And we have so many different and talented faculty members and staff members here who are invested in tackling the problems at all levels. That we've got the folks who are thinking big picture and 30,000 foot, and we've got the people who are thinking boots on the ground. And between all of those approaches, we will get to progress.
Well, I have hope, as I said. So maybe just spend a couple of minutes. So this is the surgeon speaking. I understand that there are amendments to the Constitution. I can't go too deep into them, but you have expertise in one of them. You want to just talk about your interest in the Fourth Amendment?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So
Keep it in
tell me
surgeon
when to
terms.
shut up, Alex. So, one of the reasons that I absolutely love teaching in the criminal procedure space is because when you walk into a class with starry-eyed law students who frequently can't connect at a personal level with any other aspect of their legal education, when they walk into a criminal procedure class, everybody has a story. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a story, either as, from a traffic stop to a domestic incident to a misdemeanor that they picked up because they were smoking weed in high school, right? Everybody has a story about some involvement in the criminal justice system or contact with the criminal justice system, even if it's just jury duty. And so one of the lovely things about that personal connection to the space is that when you are talking to students about the substance, they immediately engage with it because they feel like they understand it. And then you can use those personal connections, because so much of the way that we have interpreted the Fourth Amendment, and I say we, I mean the Supreme Court has interpreted the Fourth Amendment, is counterintuitive. And so you can use those intuitions that students have about what the Fourth Amendment should be and unpack them so that we can get to what the Fourth Amendment is. So for those on the call who do not know what the Fourth Amendment is, the Fourth Amendment is the amendment in the Constitution that actually protects all of us from unreasonable searches and seizures. It is the amendment that keeps us from living in a police state. And frequently people say, well, if I'm not doing anything wrong, why do I care if my house is searched, my bag is searched, my car is searched? And I say, you should care because it is deeply anti-American for us to live in a society where our privacy is at the whim and discretion of armed government agents. And so even if you are not doing anything wrong at all, I actually think you should care a great deal about the Fourth Amendment. The reason that the Fourth Amendment is so frequently interpreted as being about protecting criminals is because of the remedies that the court has put in place to enforce the rights that are protected under the Fourth Amendment. And so, Fourth Amendment protects us against unreasonable searches and seizures. Again, Alex, if I'm going on too long, tell me to shut up. But
No, see, I'll never interrupt because I love this stuff. But
okay.
and I meant what I said about the map v. Ohio. That was a great discussion.
Okay. So the Fourth Amendment protects us against unreasonable searches and seizures. When those rights are violated, you could think of lots of different ways, right? If we were writing on a blank slate, you could think of lots of different ways to address that violation, right? So you could say, We could fine the police. You could say we keep the evidence out. You could say an automatic HR disciplinary reprimand happens within the police. You can think of a lot of different ways to attack that violation. What the court has said is when those rights are violated, the primary remedy is going to be the exclusion of the evidence from trial. So what that does is immediately puts enforcement of the Fourth Amendment rights in the hands of people who, one, are being prosecuted, and two, against whom some evidence was seized that they now want to keep out of court, right? So that shifts the frame of who is protecting the Fourth Amendment. It doesn't mean that other people's rights aren't violated. It just means that they don't really have a lot of skin in the game in terms of attacking the violation. And so to me, that framing does damage to the amendment because it shifts our understanding of what is actually being protected. And what is actually being protected is our right as Americans to go about our business without the intrusion of government. And so I could go on and on and on for days about the Fourth Amendment, about criminal procedure generally. I find that it is a place where students coming into law school can suddenly see the connections up between what can feel like a very sterile and unrelatable body of rules in a way that actually connects up to their real life. And once they see those connections, I say it's like that movie, The Sixth Sense. Remember Bruce Willis? And the little kid in the movie was, I see dead people, right? What I used to tell my students all the time is once you see the connections up between the law and your life, you will never be able to unsee them. And suddenly you will see the law everywhere all the time. And so once they make that initial connection, I love it because it translates over into all of their other classes. And so they're seeing contracts everywhere, and they're seeing property rules everywhere, and they're seeing civil procedure rules everywhere, right? All of a sudden, they're seeing all the ways in which this society of laws and not men and women is completely interwoven with law, the legal rules. So that's what I love about it.
I can see there's no passion here, that's for sure. I just wonder, do you give your students a break about 20 minutes in to let them recharge their adrenaline in your discussions? It must be an exciting time.
It is a fun class and they get no breaks.
No breaks.
I tend to be a very hard charging professor. So,
well,
yeah.
It sounds fascinating. And these insights are really of interest to me. I find them revealing in many ways. Alex, do we have any questions yet?
You know, I always keep you informed about that. I was about to tell you we do have one I'm going to call, but I haven't told her we're going to call on her. So Safa Pool, get ready because I want you to go ahead and ask your question about law school clinics. Safa, you there?
Where's Safa?
Safa. Well, I'll read her question. She said, speaking of engaging with the community and our neighbors, does the law school have clinics or attorneys that provide legal services at no cost or moderate cost? And how is that advertised to them?
Do we ever? Yes, we have. So the clinical law program here at Maryland Carey Law just turned 50 years old. It is one of the oldest clinical law programs in the country. And I dare say it is the best. So the faculty that we have teaching in the clinical law program, we have about 18 offerings in the clinical law program, and it runs the gamut. We do everything from civil work to criminal work, from trial work to appellate work and beyond. All of our services are offered at no cost to the clients that we represent. The students who are doing the work earn credit for the legal representation that they are providing. They are authorized to practice law under the law license of their clinical faculty member. And so they are very, very, very closely supervised by a very experienced attorney. We hire onto the law faculty to teach in the clinic extremely experienced attorneys who have been working in the space in most cases for a decade or more. And they bring all of that knowledge and all of that experience into the clinic to teach students in a particular subject area. And all of the clients are represented at no cost. So if you go onto the law school's website, if you want to find out what clinics we're offering, if you go onto the law school's website and click on the tab for programs and centers, and then click on the tab for clinic life. I think I'm getting that right. We just changed the website, but I think that's still the correct thread. It will pop up the entire list of clinics. It'll have a number down at the bottom. If somebody on here is watching from the law school and you have the phone number for the clinics, can you please pop it into the chat for Alex?
Yeah.
And we can provide the phone number as well.
Great. Since we did manage to unmute Safa finally.
Okay.
Safa, you have a follow-up?
Yes.
Did she answer your question?
She did. Thank you, Dean Hutchins.
You are very
Okay.
welcome.
Sorry about that.
Feel well, out there in the community. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Linda Brown sent me the number. I'll send that out to everyone shortly. I have an anonymous question about one of the things you talked about was the diversity of faculty, the diversity of really the whole community, inside versus outside. How are you? What measures are you taking to address the diversity of our faculty?
Mm-hmm. So I will say at the top that I think that one of Maryland Carey Law's strengths is the diversity of its faculty, staff, and student body. This is one of the most diverse institutions that I have ever worked in. I think that it is not a secret that the law is persistently one of the least diverse professions in the nation. And I think that it is incumbent upon law schools to do something about that. That it is incumbent upon us to train lawyers who understand that you cannot have excellence without having diversity. It is incumbent upon us to train lawyers who are adept at functioning well in heterogeneous environments. And so I think that it is a very core part of our mission, not just to admit diverse classes of students, but also to ensure that the faculty who are standing in the front of those classrooms and teaching those students are broadly representative of the communities into which we will be sending students to work. And so one of the things that, so historically, we have done a really fantastic job of maintaining diversity. I think that we lost some of that with retirements and attrition and COVID. We lost some of the diversity of the faculty, but we are working very, very, very hard to rebuild. We are also in the wake of what we are anticipating coming, probably in June. It's April now, so probably in about 2 months. We are anticipating a decision coming down from the Supreme Court. I think that everybody who is watching it anticipates that what is going to happen is that affirmative action as we know it in this country will be completely gutted. And so that doesn't necessarily directly affect our admissions process, because for a very, very, very long time at the law school, we have been looking at the whole student, or the whole applicant. We have been interviewing every admitted student that we bring into the law school. But what it is going to affect is our pipeline, right? Because colleges are going to be hit by that admissions decision. And as they become increasingly less diverse, that's going to affect the pool that is moving into law school. And so one of the things that I have been working very hard on with Dr. Jarrell's help is ensuring that we have very robust pipelines with the HBCUs here in Maryland, right? So there are 4 HBCUs here in Maryland, And I am working very hard to ensure that we have more formal pipelines in place with them so that we can ensure that our pool of applicants continues to be diverse. We are doing the same work nationally, regionally and nationally with minority serving institutions, with predominantly Black institutions, and with HBCUs nationwide. And that really is just about understanding that we cannot be excellent. We cannot maintain excellence if we don't pull from a number of different backgrounds and areas and regions and I mean we have to be diverse if we want to educate excellent lawyers, and so that is a very critical priority for me.
Renee, let me ask you a question related to that. So is this going to apply only to student admissions, or will it spill over into faculty and to staff? Where else is that going to spill into?
I think the expectation is everywhere. I think that the case itself is about admissions, but I am not hopeful that the court is going to draft an opinion with a scalpel. To borrow from your field.
Right.
I anticipate that to the extent that they do not affirmatively declare that the use of race as a consideration is prohibited across the board and beyond admissions, that they will at least very strongly signal. And that what is going to happen is people are going to start self-policing in anticipation of, and the lower courts are going to pull those threads from the opinion, as we call it, the dicta. They are going to pull that and turn it into holdings in the lower court, and will gut affirmative action outside of the admission space that way, even if the court doesn't do it on its own.
Interesting. Alex?
I guess it's almost pointless to ask this, but we have an anonymous question question about, are you concerned about the politicization of the court?
Oh,
That's kind of what you're talking about here, right?
So here's what I would say. And I think lawyers know this, and I think non-lawyers probably can intuit it, but I don't know that they'd be able to articulate it. So the legislative branch has the power of the purse, right? They've got appropriations. They can defund or fund things, and that's the way they can move levers and maintain legitimacy, pass laws. The executive branch has the power of the army and has force behind it to sort of enforce its legitimacy. The judiciary has neither of those. All that the judiciary has is public legitimacy and a belief that when judges speak, they are speaking from a place of wisdom and neutral application of the rules. I think what has happened in recent years to America's judiciary is deeply troubling, because in many ways, the politicization of the courts is delegitimizing the courts. And when we get to a place where the public no longer respects opinions that are being handed down, no longer respects that the court is speaking from a place of wisdom and knowledge and neutral application of principles, that's a very troubling world. And yes, I am very, very, very worried about the politicization of the courts. I am very worried about it. And I am very worried about what will happen on the day when people decide they just don't have to adhere to what a court has said, because the court is not speaking of the law. The court is speaking of its own political whims.
When you're talking about the Constitution, though, is part of the problem that people may want to change the way what the law says, but we've really kind of lost the ability to change the Constitution, haven't we?
So
Practically.
so I I think that the problem is actually more more immediate than that. I think that the problem is that the way that the court normally shifts our understanding of what the Constitution is, or what the Constitution says, or what the Constitution requires, is an incremental and progressive process. It is a process that builds from one case to the next, that with some exceptions, when we see just overturning of precedent because the world has changed, that for the most part, what we see is a gradual development and shift, as the world changes and the court catches up with it. What we have seen in recent years is the wholesale shredding of longstanding precedent. But more troubling, what we have seen is an outcome-based approach to judging that has prevented us from seeing any logical through line from one case to the next. No principled rationale upon which decisions are being made. And the decisions are being made based upon desired outcomes, not upon closely held principles and constitutional norms. That's what I think is more troubling. I have not agreed with every decision coming out of many courts, but at least you were able to say, I see how they got there, right? Like I see how they got there from what came before. I think in this modern era, all you can say is, I see how they got there because I knew how they wanted it to come out. And that's never been what the court was supposed to be. So I find that deeply troubling.
All right. Well,
Alex?
lighter, but no less important note, I'm going to bring in Zandra Rawlinson. Zandra, what's your question? Having trouble unmuting people. Oh, there you go, Zandra. You should be able to go ahead and ask your question.
And all of this great information about the Fourth Amendment. I just wanted to know, how do you practice self-care? Can you hear me?
So how do I what?
Can I just repeat that, because I don't think everybody could hear. Sandra, your audio is very low, but that's okay. She's asking, how do you practice self-care?
Okay, so here's what I will say. I just took a vacation for the first time in a really, really, really long time. I went to Marrakesh with a couple of girlfriends, and actually really unplugged for about 7 days. And I came back like a religious convert. So I came back a huge proponent of vacations and a huge proponent of taking time off. And so I came back and I said to everybody who would listen, I said, I think at the first faculty meeting, the first staff meeting that I had after I came back, I said, all of you should be burning up all your vacation time every year. Like, I don't want a single person in this building who is not taking their vacation time every single year whenever they can. And here's why. I love my job, like love my job. And left to my own devices, I would do my job almost all of the time. But what I recognized is that I do my job better when I take some time to get away from my job and do something else. I remember Dr. Jarrell asked me once, he said, Renee, what are your hobbies? And I said, I don't know. So I am working on getting some hobbies.
Good.
And big fan of vacation time. Big fan of vacation time. I think that everybody should use your leave. Work hard. Let's definitely work hard, but let's play hard and unplug too. Let's fill up our cups so that we can pour back into the work that we love so much. I spend time with family. I have a phenomenal group of girlfriends, absolutely phenomenal group of girlfriends who have been my day ones forever, and we try to find time to get away and unplug and hang out with each other and make sure that we are holding each other up. I do yoga, I do Pilates, but Dr. Jarrell tells me those aren't hobbies, so I'm not sure that I can count those. And I really love terrible television. So really, really trashy television that is totally disconnected to anything that I do on the job ever.
Well, now you have to give an example. You can't just.
Do I?
Yeah.
You really did. You brought it up.
All right, fine. So like terrible, like the Kardashians, terrible, like the Real Housewives. I am
Hey, don't go
talking
any farther. Don't burst the bubble. That's good.
brain dead television, where you literally don't have to watch it at all.
Wow. Okay.
Well, Renee, I understand what you say. I have great trouble taking off long periods of time, but I do believe that it's really important to disconnect. In my case, I try to disconnect on the weekend and early in the morning, but that time is exceedingly valuable.
Yeah.
Exceedingly.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that America is a weird, it is a weird country in the way in which we prioritize busyness and exhaustion in ways that I think are really, really unhealthy. We sort of wear it like a badge of courage that we are overworked. And it's not. People should really, really, really take the time to recharge, because we have so much more to give to the work that we love when we actually take the time to do that.
So then what do you do in Marrakesh?
I could go on and on and on. It is a beautiful country. I would probably add it to the list of places I could go every single year. Every time I travel, actually, this is going to be a hobby. Here's a hobby, Dr. Jarrell. Here's a hobby. So I am determined. Every time I travel, it resets my mind on this. I am determined to learn 5 languages before I die. So I used to be fluent in Spanish. I'm from New York. I have cousins who are Puerto Rican, and so when I was around them all the time, I could speak Spanish fluently. And then I moved to Maryland, and I've been here 20 years, and it all fell away, and it's gone. Marrakesh, if I spoke Arabic or French, I could have gotten along perfectly. Everybody there speaks at least 3 languages. Everybody. And so what do you do in Marrakesh? You relax and you enjoy the weather, and you go to the Medina, and if you eat delicious food, and if you speak Arabic or French, you actually communicate with lots and lots of people. So that's what you do in Marrakesh. But by the time I go back, I am determined that I'm going to be able to speak French. I can't promise Arabic, but I am determined that I will have picked Spanish back up and mastered French.
Duolingo.
I have it on my phone.
Got it. All right, Alex.
All right, I hate to say this, but we've got more heavy questions coming. So
Okay.
I'm going to read this one on behalf of someone. She writes, what is your view about the status and prospect of the Equal Rights Amendment? Are the current state ratifications valid? Is the timeline invalid because of it's in the preface, or valid? I don't think that's right. Does it need to be reintroduced and start again, et cetera? Where are we with the ERA?
So I believe, if I am remembering correctly, I believe that we are in a position where we actually have to go back and start again. I believe that we have timed out for adoption and ratification with the states. So I believe, if I am remembering correctly, but I say the same. I am not an ERA expert. I am a Fourth Amendment expert. I work in the criminal justice space. But if I am remembering correctly, I think we are at a place where we actually have to go back and reset and start again. And I am not particularly hopeful. I am not particularly hopeful that we are at a place in this country where that kind of amendment would pass. And I hate to say that, but we are looking at the retrenchment of so many individual rights. And, with the Dobbs decision, I think that signaled probably a broader attack on women's rights than a lot of people are acknowledging. I don't think that it was just about abortions. I think that it was about women's autonomy over our own bodies. And in this climate, that leads me not to be particularly hopeful about the passage of an amendment like the ERA, unfortunately.
All right, another heavy legal question. I'm going to let Antoinette Fields ask it for herself. Antoinette, are you there? You have to unmute yourself.
She's not in yet.
She is. Go ahead, Antoinette. Oh, her microphone is closed now. Well, I'll have to read it again. I'm sorry. What is your take on the loan forgiveness for higher education? She says, if you choose not to answer, I do understand.
So I assume she is talking about federal loan forgiveness.
Right.
And I don't know why I would choose not to answer that. I actually think it's a good thing. I think that higher education costs too much money in this country. And it is not a problem that any one institution is going to fix. I think it's a systemic problem. I think that we need to do a couple of things. I think that we need to make higher education more accessible to a broader swath of people. I also think that we need to recognize that there are huge numbers of young people coming up for whom higher education is not their desired path. And we cannot create a society that provides them few to no viable options for earning a living wage without a college degree. And so I think that we have to think about it in a multifaceted way. So a piece of it is about making higher education more affordable. Another piece of it is about creating workforce development and pathways into the economy that don't require college or professional degrees.
All right, I'm just asking a member of the audience if she wants to follow up with her previously anonymous question. So I'm going to let her decide that. And Blair Innes says, not in a location where I can unmute. My question is, I was a student when Dean Hutchins was a teacher at the law school. You're still a teacher at the law school. What does that mean? And I remember her classes were always full. What made her decide to switch from teaching to administration? Does she see herself ever going back to the classroom?
Yes, yes, and yes. I am actually, I think, I have to check with my Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, but I think I am on the schedule for next semester, I think. I love teaching. I will never not love teaching. And I left teaching. Well, actually, I didn't leave teaching. I went into administration, not because I was running from teaching, but because after 14 years on the faculty here, I felt like I might be of service in a different capacity at a different institution. But I actually taught criminal procedure while I was at UDC. And now that I am back here, I wanted to give it about a year and a half of getting the administrative piece of this job under my belt, but then I will very happily move right back into the classroom to teach one class every year. I haven't decided yet if it will be a clinic or a podium class, but I think it's very, very, very important in these jobs. I think that these administrative jobs can be isolating. And you can forget the reason why the work you're doing matters so much if you allow yourself to become too disconnected from the institution that you are serving. And so for me, teaching, I'm plugged into the faculty because I was a former faculty member. I am plugged into the staff because I am working with them all the time. It's very important to me to also stay plugged in with the students, and teaching is a way to do that. Students, oddly enough, tend not to wander into the dean's office just to say hi. And so you can become a little bit disconnected from the students. But if you are standing in the front of a classroom, at the end of class, students will come to you. And students will connect with you, and students will talk to you, and you can keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the institution from their perspective. And that's very important to me. So I will happily move back into the class in a little bit.
All right, Christine Valerian really wants to follow up on her ERA question. Christine, can you unmute and explain what you want to ask?
Really want to follow up, but I will follow up. So I'm Christine Valerian. I'm with the School of Pharmacy, and that's my day job. Otherwise, I've worked on getting the ERA passed for many years, if not decades. And my question to you was asking your opinion as to which strategy you thought was legally correct, because I'm not a lawyer, but I work with people who are lawyers, and there are legal scholars that believe in each of the strategies. For example, there are legal scholars that believe that the ERA already is the 28th Amendment. And in fact, I have in my hand a booklet of the Constitution that has the ERA as the 28th Amendment. Then there are legal scholars that think because the timeline is in the preface instead of the body of the amendment, that it can be easily removed. And Maryland's own Ben Cardin is one of those, and he most recently introduced legislation to that end. So I'm working with all these legal scholars that are pushing their various ways to push the ERA to become passed, and the 28th Amendment. And I was just wondering, I mean, they all have an argument, which sounds really logical to me, but not being a lawyer, I'm like, okay, which one is correct? So it sounds like you're in the camp with Ruth Bader Ginsburg saying, the ERA is needed, but yeah, we need to start again. So that was my question to you. There's experts. Yeah.
So what I will say, Christine, is that that is just my. I am not an ERA expert. That is just my belief based upon what I have read about the posture of the amendment to this point. I think ultimately who is right, which strategy, which approach is the correct one, is going to be the one that wins. And so I don't know that we can say at this point, of the various theories about the posture of the amendment, I don't know that we can say at this point that that one or that one is the correct one. I think that certainly the dominant one is that it's timed out. But will that be the final one? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Good point. No, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. My gut kind of tells me that, yeah, we need to do it over again, but I don't think that that's a winning strategy. So
I agree with you.
There you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'll work on all the strategies, and we'll see if any wins.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Thank you.
Fingers crossed.
Alex, I just want to make one comment, not about ERA, but about Renee's previous comment about teaching. I think that's exceedingly important. Not only does it keep you in touch with reality, but it lets you know what the students are thinking. And most importantly, and so easily forgotten in this place, is that we are here for education. That is a primary mission here. And it's just easily overlooked. The more research you do, the less teaching you do. And somehow we've got to have those two on a par, because they're both critical to the effectiveness of this university. So I applaud you for that, Renee. Please keep teaching. I've never stopped. I think if I were to stop teaching, I don't think I could tolerate this job otherwise. So I think it's important.
Yeah, very.
Alex?
Do these high profile, national cases, do they excite a generation of students to want to be law students? I mean, there was a period of time where there was a little bit of feeling that there aren't that many jobs out there, and maybe I don't want to go into law. Is that changed, and is this playing a role?
So I think it is. So law schools nationwide saw a huge bump in applications during the COVID era. And I think that was a number, COVID was just a piece of that. I think that another piece of it was that we were seeing assaults on our democracy. We were seeing attacks on the environment. We were seeing attacks on individual rights. We were seeing a coarsening of the public discourse. We were seeing all of these ways in which the very fabric of our national government were fraying. And lawyers have a very important role in shoring up and doing a lot of the repair work in each of those spaces. And so I think that the very, very, very big challenges that we face as a nation are encouraging to young people who are trying to find a voice, who are trying to find, it gets back to our earlier conversation about where do you start? And how do you make a change and how do you make a difference? I think that a lot of young people are seeing the law as a place where they can plug in and work to make a difference and work to make this country better and push the country closer to its democratic ideals than it currently is, which I think is encouraging. Being a lawyer has been literally the honor of my life. It is the most important work, the work that we do as lawyers. And so I always encourage young people to think about whether the law is a space that they would like to work in, because there are so many different ways to be a lawyer. It's not all just the standing in front of a jury in a courtroom arguing a case. It's also hammering out the details of a contract or thinking carefully about policy or doctrine. It's about passing laws or enforcing laws. I mean, there are just so many different ways to deploy a JD that I encourage lots of young people who are interested in making a difference to consider it.
Alex, one last quick one.
Well, I will just say this: we have repeat questions. Earlier we talked about rankings. And this is a long question.
You cannot ask that question with 2 minutes to go.
I know. But what is I know there's a big philosophical question, but what is the law school doing with rankings? Are you participating? Are you backing off? Are you?
So I think is public knowledge that the law school decided not to provide U.S. News and World Report with any proprietary data this year. The hope is that U.S. News and World Report will move to a place where they are actually measuring things that we care about and that we think students should care about in a way that would allow us to participate more robustly. I think students should absolutely have information as they are trying to decide where to go to law school, and how a law school is doing in terms of outcomes for those students is critically important. But let's measure that. Let's not measure how many chairs are in the library. So.
I never doubted that you could nail that in 60 seconds. It was never a doubt. Thank you.
Well, Renee, this has been a joy. We should do this again.
Let's do it.
It's very enlightening. It's great to learn about you. It's certainly a pleasure to have you here and leading this school. And I look forward to great things from you. One of these days, I'll figure out the Fourth Amendment too.
I could talk your ear off for days about that.
I'm sure. So with that, thank you very much, Alex. Thank you. And for those participants, thank you very much. Until next time, see ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.